Hi, good evening, Steve. It's so good to see you here in London.
Nice to see you too.
And can you tell me a little bit about your role at Acumen and how you're here? And I would love to know what exactly, is it that you do for Acumen?
Okay. My name's Steve Harvey. I'm a main board director of Acumen. I'm non-executive director, so that means I'm not a full-time employee of Acumen, but I'm on the board, and I act as an advisor. And traditionally, non-executive directors are called critical friends of the business. My background is basically in education. I've been a teacher and academic since 1985, and I've worked in international education since 1990. So during that time, I've been responsible for the international recruitment of 2 universities and 2 private companies. So I've got an extensive background in international education.
Yeah, that definitely sounds like it's been an illustrious career, and thank you for letting us know about your background. And I imagine that since you've seen the education sector becoming internationalized since 1985, and that was when before, I would say, a lot of countries even had policies around liberalization of education and
Absolutely.
did not know so much about going overseas. I mean, so how was that experience, and how have you seen the sector change over the years?
Ironically, I started in international education when I was a young academic, and I was asked if I would give up some of my summer holiday to attend some British Council student recruitment fairs in Hong Kong, Malaysia, Brunei and Singapore. At the time, this was in 1990, the biggest recruiting market for UK universities was Malaysia. In fact, China hadn't come on board at all. I went to the first education fair in China in the early 90s, and that was quite an education. So I ended up in international education by chance. I was the only one who was willing to give up their summer break. And at the time, in the early days, agents were just beginning to appear as a means of recruiting international students. And in fact, I started working with agents in 1990.
Wow.
91. Mm-hmm. Tell a lie.
So
I've been working with them ever since.
Oh, that's so brilliant. And may I ask which country this was, or where you were?
The first agents I worked with were in Malaysia.
Oh, wow. Mm-hmm.
And then Singapore, then Hong Kong, and then Taiwan and China, and then the rest of the world. When I was responsible for the Pathway business at Cambridge Education Group, we had 3,000 agents located across the globe. So we've worked extensively with agents.
Oh, brilliant. So this is really great for a start for me, because one thing that I wanted to talk to you about today in particular was about this thing called aggregators, which has brought on, with the advent of technology and collision between traditional methods of recruitment of students and more so relying on the internet to get your options, to get in touch with agents, and the large network of sub-agents that exists now under this model. Can you, just to begin with, I have to be honest here, I'm absolutely unfamiliar with aggregators and how they have worked or how feasible they are. So if you can explain to us what an aggregator is actually, how it functions, and what are the basic features of such a model.
From my experience, an aggregator is basically someone who offers a technology-enabled front end. So a university and or student can access a wide range of universities. A student can access a wide range of universities. They can access a wide range of majors, and they can submit their applications to a wide range of universities. For a university, it enables it to access a wide range of students via technology. But I don't think the principles of good, robust, high-quality international student recruitment have changed. If I think back to my early days, we were after well-qualified students from a wide range of recruitment markets or countries, progressing to a wide range of courses or majors. We were and still want to minimise the cost of student acquisition. And we still want to have a strong view about the quality of the applications. Absolutely. Because one thing you do not want is a very, very large number of students who, one, aren't qualified to enter your institution, and two, don't want to enter your institution. And one of the issues around use of agents, and I'll start with agents and move to aggregators. With agents, you have to select an agent carefully. In fact, we used to have, and still, most institutions have very stringent checks on agents. And one of those checks is the quality of the students that they're sending and the conversion rate of the students. So what you don't want are thousands of applications that turn into tens of enrolments, because that drives up your cost of student acquisition. It costs you a lot of money.
Absolutely.
The other thing is, with poor quality applications, then their chances of getting a visa are reduced, and that can put your ability to recruit at risk with regard to, in the case of the UK, the Home Office.
Right.
So that principle remains true to this day. You want good agents, you want some visibility about the quality of the pipeline. You want control about what that agent is saying about your institution in market. In other words, are they legal, decent, honest and truthful about your institution, and not making, for want of a better phrase, false claims about your institution. You want the students to have accurate information about your institution. The last thing you want is for a student to turn up and find it isn't for them, or that they've been told something else with regard to the course content, with regard to the availability of student accommodation, with regard to the cost, tuition cost, with regard to the cost of living. You want the student to be fully informed about what they're saying, because for most students and families, ultimately it's families who fund most overseas students, it's possibly the second biggest investment they'll ever make, apart from buying a house.
Absolutely.
And sometimes it's more costly than buying a house, especially if you study medicine here in the UK for 5 years. It's
I totally relate to that. I mean, studying for my undergrad and my postgraduate degrees here in the UK has cost an arm and leg, and only my father can tell you how much it has cost him. But other than that, you mentioned something really interesting about how quality of students is something that aggregators may not be able to assure us of. A lot has been said around that. And we've also seen a recent UK ESA reports around it, even British Council reports, are not using the word aggregators in particular, but telling us a lot about how we must keep checks and balances around the quality of agents that we are hiring or are investing it outside the UK as well. But before all of this, there is also a narrative from I think aggregators, from their point of view, that this kind of helps diversify the student body, the student recruitment processes as well, from where the students are coming. So, for example, in India, they're saying aggregators are extremely useful in tapping into tier 2 and tier 3 cities, or sub-agent networks in places that were earlier just not reachable for recruiters. So, do you think...
I suppose I'd take a couple of steps. The principles of good student recruitment remain true in my mind, no matter what the recruitment channel is. So how do you recruit international students? Well, one, you go out into a country and meet students through exhibitions and fairs. You encourage student applications through your own website. You work with agents, but here, whenever I've worked with agents and whenever anyone responsible works with agents, they will vet them. They will have an ethics policy for agents. They will undertake what's called due diligence with regard to that agent. In other words, they'll talk to other people who've used them. They'll look at their data for student conversion. And they'll sign a contract with that agent with very stringent clauses with regard to performance, with regard to representation, misrepresentation, etc., etc. For a company like CG, where I used to work, we had agents everywhere in second, third, fourth tier cities in India and China. So the rationale that aggregators use, saying access, well, if you have enough agents, then you have access to all of the students you need.
Absolutely.
No matter what. One of the, I put my hat on as someone who's working in a university. If I was approached by an aggregator, I would be very interested in what they had to offer. First of all, I'd want to know how much. I would want to know about the quality and the quantity of their supply chains. In other words, who is providing you your students? I would want to know who they are and how they're quality assured upon signing, but also in terms of ongoing performance. In other words, are they vetting their supply chains? Whenever I've signed an agent, and I would imagine the majority of the supply chain for an aggregator is agents. And some agents work with what are called sub-agents. In other words, let's say there's an agent, a big agent in Delhi or Beijing, and then they have a network of agencies who supply them students. But I would want to take a view on the so-called sub-agents. I would want to conduct the same due diligence on the sub-agents as I would the maid agent, because you're only as good as the weakest link in your chain. So the first thing I'd be looking at is to undertake due diligence on the supply chain that an aggregator used. I would also want some data on performance.
Right.
And from what I've seen lots of data on traffic going to the website, analysed by country. But what I've seen less of is actual enrolments directly as a consequence of signing with the aggregator.
Absolutely.
So that degree of, what do you call it, transparency, I would want to see before I committed, because in signing up to an agent or an aggregator, you're putting your institution at risk.
The brand at risk.
The brand. And whenever you're putting your brand at risk, you undertake due diligence in advance. And if there's one thing that keeps a university president or vice chancellor awake at night, is their reputation.
Absolutely.
Because they take years to build and seconds to lose.
Yeah.
So I would want to see data on the supply chain. I would want to see data on the stats of who is actually recruited, because the last thing I would want as a university or a commercial international education company is to be inundated with thousands of applications, because with an aggregator it's very easy to make multiple applications. Very, very easy. A student could go on and apply to 20 institutions. Each institution is receiving that application, doesn't know how committed they are to that institution. When I used to work with agents, I used to do a lot of interviewing of students in the agent's office. So you'd get a very clear view of the commitment of the student. And you would know how serious that application is. It will cost an institution a lot of money to have thousands of applications that result in tens of actual enrolments. Right. So the cost of dealing with an application is a lot. You've got to, go through the qualifications. You've got to, run checks for visas. You've got to do all of that, and that costs a lot of money.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I would be very careful about signing up for a service, let's call it, that just resulted in lots of applications that were unqualified.
Absolutely, you're right, because I do see that the argument behind an aggregator model is extremely seductive in its appeal that it's it's going to bring in a lot of applications, a lot of students are applying, and especially it's diversifying the student body as a whole, because you're not just getting applications from India and China, but now most African countries that it has expanded to, Southeast Asia, South Asia, smaller countries, and somehow there is an argument about access and equity within within international higher education in this sphere as well. But as you rightly said, that there can be n number of applications that are filled in by one student who may or may not even be absolutely aware of your brand or the reputation of the institution, or why is it exactly that they want to apply to it, because the I would say the parts of the application remain the same for each university.
Absolutely.
And this comes, I come to my second point following from this, and I refer to the LinkedIn post made by Ryan Trainer, who's the co-founder of Adventis. And he said on his LinkedIn post, he puts up this picture and he says, well, I will give you $100 to agents. This is addressed to agents, that I will give out $100 for every 5 applications made. Now, if one student is making 10 or 15 applications, they have $200 in their pocket straight away, whereas the student might or might not even know that they've applied. And what are your thoughts on this and checks and balances around this?
It's interesting. Every agent relationship I've had since the early 90s has been based upon quality and outcomes. In other words, we conduct due diligence, but we will only pay an agent if a student has enrolled and paid their fees to us, and then we pay the agent fee. What you've just described is completely different. An agent is being paid for 5 applications with no reference to the quality of those applications. Whereas if an agent is being remunerated on the basis of a student successfully being admitted to an institution, successfully getting their visa, successfully enrolling on the degree program and paying the fees, they're worlds apart, those two things. So I worry about, once again, quality of supply chain. Because if you're offering an agent, one, you're offering to pay them without having conducted due diligence on that agent. And 2, you've got no notion of the quality of those applicants. So once again, it comes back to the sort of question I would ask of anyone who was representing my institution to recruit students. What's the quality? How do you deal with student applications? Are they appropriate for the institution that you're sending them to? Are they qualified? Do they stand a chance of getting a visa? Have they the funds to finance their course? All of those, it's qualitative aspects that you need to sort out. And I can understand the appeal to some institutions for signing up aggregators. In other words, they're keen to establish a presence overseas in a wide range of markets, and it's expensive to go and visit lots of countries. However, the cost of getting it wrong is even more expensive. And so I think with any purchase decision, when you sign up an agent or an aggregator, it's a purchase decision. You have to undertake due diligence. You wouldn't buy a house without getting a survey report, getting the legals checked, etc., etc. If I sign up an agent, I want to see that they're incorporated, that they follow local guidelines and ethics. I would want to talk to other people, similar institutions to my own that have used that agent. I don't see the evidence, and I'm not saying that it doesn't happen, of that level of stringency of due diligence in signing up agents in some aggregators. That's my personal experience. I may be wrong, but I haven't seen that. And the acid test, I would say to anyone before they sign up an agent, is to ask those questions.
Yeah.
You know, what's the quality, what's the transparency of your supply chain. I'm quite happy for agents to use sub-agents, but I want to know who those sub-agents are, what the relationship between.
Yeah.
And normally we would go and visit all the sub-agents, certainly
Yes.
in the commercial companies. We would go and see them because, you know, some agents could be operating out of wholly inappropriate premises.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that puts my brand at risk. And they could be making outlandish claims like, you know, you'll get a scholarship on arrival, or it only costs £50 a week to live in London, or things like that. You know, you need to be responsible in international student recruitment to be assured that those things are in place, I think.
Absolutely. No, that's really insightful, Steve. I think there was no better way of understanding the system and your insights from it, because it's a clear comparison between how it has really worked and that has some sorts of a system that has some sorts of checks and balances already, whereas it's a little wild out there on the internet. And I would definitely go back to my search this morning. I did a Google search before coming for this interview today, because it was really interesting to see how also when I put in my credentials and I put in my, I chose the UK as a country to study in and these are the courses I'm looking for, it repeatedly shows me the same university for different courses, for example. And the other results that I see are the featured universities. So the top 10 are just the featured universities. And somewhere you think maybe it doesn't appear to us in the first instance, but it is. It also depends on how much the universities paid to the aggregators and
absolutely.
Yeah.
I would hazard a guess that featured university means the university that's paid a fee. I might be wrong, but I would hazard a guess that that's the case. And my memory goes back to when agents first appeared in the early 90s, and I used to meet people from institutions thinking, oh, I've signed 6 agents in 6 countries. My international student recruitment is sorted. Actually, just signing an agent is just the beginning of the process. You need to develop a relationship. That agent needs to develop trust with you. And, you know, the last thing I've seen institutions sign an agent and get hundreds, if not thousands, of completely inappropriate applications. And then the agent to put pressure on the institution and say, well, this person has come from a wealthy, influential family and you must accept them.
Oh, yes, that does happen. I've heard of those.
And all of those sorts of things. So just signing up an agent, just signing up an aggregator is not the whole journey. You need to make sure that your institution is protected financially, reputationally.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're absolutely right in saying that there is this big factor that exists, and that's reputation and brand building. And similarly, even from the agent's perspective, or traditionally how methods of recruitment have worked, is that there is an ecosystem of trust between agents, the students that they service, and also between the agents and the university itself. And now that you have, for example, you have these sub-agents who are working out of particular territories but helping students in different countries, which they might not have expertise in the area or might not have expertise of the region as a whole. Do you think there is a way to go around that, or do you think aggregators might be able to overcome this challenge somehow?
I think the problem with due diligence and quality assurance is that it costs money. And if you have thousands and thousands of agents and sub-agents, how on earth, it's a question, I'm looking forward to the answer to this question, do you have appropriate quality control over those supply chains? Because one thing I've asked some aggregators to show me your supply chain, and most are very reluctant to share that. I can understand it's commercially sensitive information, but I can also see the benefit to the agent. You know, the agent just has to send 5 applications; they get $100, whether that student manifests itself or not.
Yeah, and I think that is where the problem lies in conversion, and more so in conversion there has been no data as far as I've looked up around how many students actually convert and opt for those particular universities, and if there is no relationship between the number of applications and the conversions happening. And secondly, I also feel that somehow when a student themselves is putting data onto these platforms and applying to multiple universities, first of all, I'm not sure if they get a say in the choices that they're making to multiple universities.
Absolutely.
And also that universities themselves and aggregators as service platforms are getting access to all this huge amounts of data that may not be approved or pre-approved by the students as well. What is your take on that?
I would like to see the sort of thing that the student signs, because if data can earn money. So if I had all of that data, I would be looking to monetize that data in terms of statistical reports, consultancy, etc., etc. So, and you wonder whether a student from, say, a fourth tier city in India or China has the wherewithal to understand when they're 16 or 17 what they're signing away, because there's choice and there's informed choice. And just because someone signed it doesn't mean to say that they really know what rights they've signed away with regard to their personal data. Yeah. So it comes back to a fundamental issue in essentially outsourcing international student recruitment. To an extent, you outsource it if you use agents. To an extent, you outsource it if you use aggregators, because aggregators is really just the front end which leads to the use of agents. It's about the quality of the supply chain and the transparency of the supply chain and the ongoing quality assurance of that supply chain. And what happens when someone does something wrong? I mean, typically with an agent, if they did something wrong, we would sack them immediately and report them to a relevant trade body to make sure that other institutions were protected. Yeah. And I've yet to see that degree of quality assurance with regard to supply chains.
Yeah. And this is really interesting, because when you talk about the supply chain, there's been a recent data set that has been released by the UK Council for International Student Affairs, and they talk about UK universities at least mulling over decisions on 71% of them mulling over signing up with an aggregator itself. And from what I understand from this interview, Steve, and really insights that you have, I mean, since the beginning of time in international higher education, it looks like aggregators are the emperor's new clothes. It's
a possibility. It comes back to any purchasing decision. You conduct due diligence. If I was investing in a business, you would conduct due diligence on that business. If I was buying a car, especially a second-hand car, I'd be conducting due diligence on that purchase. In the same way, if I was hiring an agent or an aggregator, I'd be conducting due diligence. And if that supplier wasn't willing to open its books to me, then I would have severe misgivings, because that would mean that I hadn't conducted due diligence. And that puts my institution, my employer, at risk. And that's something that I would lose sleep over.
Definitely. Yeah. And absolutely, that's really insightful to kind of get from you, Steve. And just one last question to put this all together in one neat box and tie it with a bow. But what advice would you give to universities in signing up with aggregators or not?
In any outsourcing decision, conduct your due diligence, both before signing and then ongoing quality assurance after you've entered that relationship. Because just because it was okay upon signing, owners can change, the regulations in a country can change. So I'm not saying don't work with any particular outsourcing situation. What I'm saying is, before you do, conduct rigorous due diligence pre-signing and rigorous and ongoing quality assurance post-signing.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Steve.
It's a huge pleasure.
This has been extremely useful, and I'm going to carry all of this information back home and use it for my future and when I sign up to do my search on Google next time. But thank you so much for joining
Thank you very
us
much.
today.
I've
And I
thoroughly
look
enjoyed
forward to meeting you again in the next episode.
Absolutely. Thank you.